This is Tiara speaking. Welcome to everyone who is joining us. We are just going to give it to 1 minute to allow people to sign in. This is Tiara speaking. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to MDCR's virtual ADA commemoration. My name is Tiara Yakini, and I lead the ADA Compliance Unit, which is housed within the Disability Rights and Compliance Division at the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. I am a dark-skinned African American female with big curly hair, and I am wearing a rose-colored dress. For full accessibility, it is critical that speakers first identify themselves by name before proceeding to speak and mute their microphones after they are done speaking. We have ASL interpreters on screen, and live card captioning is available by turning on subtitles using the CC icon on the lower part of the screen. The host will make sure that a spotlight is on all presenters and interpreters. To view both the presenter and the interpreter, along with any presentation materials, please make sure that the gallery view is selected on your personal device. A question and answer session is scheduled at the end of the commemoration, so please direct any questions to the Q&A box. Questions will be posed to presenters at that time. A note about accommodations. As stated, questions will be taken using the Q&A function. However, if you need an accommodation to sign or voice your question, please let us know. One final note, the views and opinions expressed by participants and presenters are their own and not necessarily those of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. With that said, we are so glad that you are joining us for today's ADA virtual commemoration, looking at the past, designing for the future. As you may know, President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA, into law on July 26, 1990. Therefore, July 2025 marks the 35th anniversary of the law's passing. In honoring this historic occasion, we have planned 4 dynamic sessions with a variety of presenters who will speak to us about the ADA, potential barriers to access, designing with accessibility in mind, and what the next 35 years may hold. Today's commemoration will begin with the reflection on the ADA and accessible design featuring Kaya Kitchen of DEAF C.A.N. We'll then move into a moderated discussion on digital design featuring experts from Michigan State University, Teach Access, and the University of Michigan, offering insights from various disciplines and perspectives. Next, filmmaker, professor, and award-winning author Sara Hendren will explore the importance of programmatic accessibility. And finally, we'll conclude with a panel discussion featuring speakers from the previous sessions and examine future possibilities concerning accessibility and the ADA. Please keep in mind that each session will be no more than 40 minutes, and we will have a quick break between each one. Due to the brief nature of these sessions, again, all questions will be captured using the Q&A function, and as many questions as possible will be addressed in the final session of today's program. So now, I am very excited to welcome our first guest, Kaya Kitchen. Kaya is a case manager at DEAF C.A.N. She is also a member of Michigan Lead K's core group to promote a strong language foundation for all deaf and hard of hearing children before kindergarten. As a deaf person, she knows the importance of advocating for the deaf community to ensure all would have equal access to education, employment, healthcare, and overall quality of life. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Kaya for a guided reflection on the ADA and accessible design. Please join me in welcoming Kaya Kitchen.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. I am Kaya. I'm a biracial woman. I'm wearing an orange turtleneck with a blue jean jacket, black pants, clear colored glasses, a short afro with a white background. Thank you for the introduction, Tiara. I really appreciate it.
This is Tiara. Thank you, Kaya. We are very excited to have you with us today. So I'm going to jump right into it because we have a very short time. My first question for you is, as we mark the 35th anniversary of the ADA, from your perspective, what successes are cause for celebration?
One of the biggest successes in 35 years was societal mindset. You know, how we started with um, the civil rights, charity, private organizations sponsoring our individuals who didn't have access to services. And now we're shifting to civil rights, human rights. What's really important is to know and be cognizant of people having accessibility to employment, making sure that deaf and hard of hearing individuals, when they are applying for jobs, that the ADA gives us opportunity, legal opportunity and protection. And so we have access throughout society now because of that.
This is Tiara speaking. Thank you, Kaya. So I heard you say that one of the biggest successes was the mindset shift that has taken place. I now want to know, what do you think our world would look like without the protections and progress brought about by the ADA?
Thank you for that question. Again, this is Kaya time. There'd be a lot of isolation happening if we didn't have that. And so it's important that we have accessibility to employment, education, healthcare, and alike. ADA is not just about ramps or captioning, but it's about recognizing that everyone has a right to show up and be who they are, to have access and that space. And with the ADA, we have seen that minimize that isolation, that people are now into these spaces. They can thrive.
This is Tiara speaking. Thank you so much for answering that question, Kaya. My next question is, do you believe the voices of people who are deaf are well represented in conversations when it comes to designing accessible programs and services, as well as developing inclusive policies? And if not, in your opinion, what needs to change?
This is Guy speaking. Wonderful question. Um, Honestly, no. The design for people was not intentional for those who are deaf and hard of hearing and those who have disabilities. The environment is designed for not everyone, and it should be designed for those who have disabilities. Those should be brought to the table to make sure that their considerations and thoughts are implemented within that design to look at our perspectives, our needs. And that's really important to bring that to the forefront when design is happening. We're not represented enough in these spaces, and we need to be invited and involved.
This is Tiara speaking. Do you have any suggestions on ways we can address that?
This is Kai speaking. Great question. I think it's really important to bring that awareness to any discussion. It could be at church, libraries, during meetings. Bring up that topic of ADA and mention how important it is for them to have this dialogue with individuals, be opening to questioning and asking folks, have an open mind, open heart, be willing to listen, so we can make sure that change happens. We are not all monolithic within our disabilities. We all have different needs and accesses. So we want to make sure that everyone is included and that their identity is recognized and their accessibility is recognized within that space.
This is Tiara speaking. Thank you, Kaya. In reflecting on your own experience, have there been moments where accessible design empowered you to fully participate in a space or event, and what made that possible?
This is Kaya speaking. Thank you for that question. As a deaf individual, last year I went to Chicago to the National Association for the Deaf Conference. I was really mind blown to see so many different accessibility features and accommodations for various individuals. Yes, I am a deaf woman, right? When I arrived to the conference, I saw so many different accommodations for deafblind individuals, people who are deaf with other disabilities. And I was just amazed to learn so much, right? Not just for myself, that I was able to be empowered, but that space empowered so many other individuals with their disabilities and accommodations. The content during the sessions were very amazing. People discussed about what was important to them to make sure that others are aware. So when we're planning conferences, when we're planning meetings, we're making sure that we're inclusive of all these different accessibility and accommodations for individuals who need it. And we are responsible to make sure that those individuals have that access.
This is Tiara speaking. That is really good. Thank you so much for sharing that. So what I hear you saying is, as we're designing our programs and our conferences and the various activities that we host, it's important to have accessibility in mind from the very beginning, and that it makes a very real difference in how people experience our programs, our services, and our events. So thank you for that, Kaya. My next question is, how often do you encounter environments, whether they're are physical environments or digital environments, or even services and programs that are clearly not designed with deaf or hard of hearing individuals in mind? Is that something that's common in your experience?
This is Kaya speaking. Oh my. Yes, it's a challenging question. Honestly, as a deaf advocate, I see it all the time, not just in person, but digital as well. With my clients who are deaf and hard of hearing, when I do case management, I go to their appointments with them, meetings with them as their advocate. And I sit and I watch to make sure that my clients are able to have complete communication access. So sometimes there may not be an interpreter available, or the interpreter themselves are not culturally competent to communicate and facilitate the communication that is happening. And so I am there to make sure that the client knows how to approach this and address this with the individual and make sure that there's no awkwardness there and educate them during the meetings and during the appointments. And sometimes that consumes the time because that's not what the time is scheduled for, right? And so we're wasting trying to educate and make sure people are aware and cognizant of what's going on instead of focusing on the real thing, which is possibly, not possibly, the actual meeting and the doctor's appointment. So we want to make sure that when we're communicating with, the doctors or the professionals, that that education is provided to them prior to the appointment so that the appointment can focus solely on what it's supposed to be. And so um, I help provide that guided information to make sure that in the future, the experience is positive for the client, right? Because they become disoriented and thrown off from what's going on instead of focusing on what's happening. And as an advocate, I've seen these things and I value everything that is encompassed with them. And it's important as a deaf advocate and as a case manager to make sure that they are seen and heard and that accommodations are there for them prior to their meetings and their appointments.
This is Tiara speaking. Thank you for sharing that, Kaya. I have a question. So, for anyone who might be watching this either live or in the future, what are some of the resources that are available for doctors' offices or businesses regarding effective communication?
This is Kai speaking. Speaking. That's a good question. Um, First thing is always ask the the deaf individual what kind of accommodations they need. That's number one. What is it that they want? And then after, move forward with in-person interpreting. If you're already set up with VRI interpreting, that is up to the client. And if that's their preference to choose that, then they should choose it. But who should not make that decision is the doctor or the person who is providing services. The
This
only
is Sarah
thing that
speaking. I'm sorry to interrupt, Kaya. For those who do not know, what is VRI interpreting?
This is Kaya speaking. Yes, I'm sorry, not a problem. So about 10, 15 years, it's been very popular. VRI is video remote or video relay interpreting. It can be on an iPad or a computer screen. The interpreter is on the screen during the appointment when others are in person. I think it's a wonderful tool, right? It can be a backup for emergencies if the interpreter is not able to show up in person, last minute appointments. So it could be a wonderful tool. However, it's not perfect, right? It's a 2D screen and technology is not always not reliable. You need to be able to view the interpreter. And so if the Wi-Fi is not strong, there's an issue. There's freezing that can happen, misinformation, and so lagging. So it's really important that according to the ADA, the deaf individual should have an interpreter who is certified. And most often, interpreters are not certified, especially in medical, and have a medical endorsement. And that's required here in the state of Michigan. There's a lot of miscommunication that can happen, and that miscommunication can lead to wrong treatment and misdiagnosis and wrong medications. Uh, and so those misdiagnoses from the doctor's office tracks with that individual and have a long and lasting impact on that deaf individual. And so that's where, as a deaf advocate, I step in to make sure that that doesn't happen. I don't try to take over and run the client's life. That's not the purpose of case management. It's there to advocate and make sure that they have their accommodations and accessibilities provided. And so when they're there with their provider or whoever the appointment is with, that is emphasized. I want people to be aware of VRI, which is video relay interpreting. Don't use that instead of using an in-person interpreter. And oftentimes, especially in medical situations, those interpreters are not certified and not able to accommodate our clients at their level of receptiveness, expressiveness, and understanding. And it can be very sticky, you know. And I get it, emergencies happen. And so you need something to support to provide accessibility and accommodations until someone is in place and available. And I get that, but use it sparingly.
This is Tiara speaking. Thank you. So communicating with individuals about their specific needs is very important, is what I heard you say. My next question is, what advice would you give to designers, planners, or employers who want to create more accessible environments?
This is Kaya speaking. My advice would be for anyone who is designing or planning, um, even for employment, hiring individuals that um, need accessibility, especially deaf and hard of hearing, hire a deaf consultant. They are typically experts in understanding how environments can be deaf friendly, whether it's in person or Zoom. As you all know, that can be a challenge. And so having a deaf consultant or a person with a disability that is a consultant, they can see these different things that need to be there that is not open to others. Just like here, you see the interpreters today. One has black and dark blue background. And that is because we want to make sure that their hands are standing out and visible. And so sometimes we also have where they have to specific clothing, where solid clothing is preferred to make sure that there's no distraction, especially with a deafblind individual. They can't see the signs clearly through a 2D screen. And these are things that individuals who are not within the space and the realm of deafblind individuals would not even be aware of. And so that's why having that consultant there will be able to help you pinpoint these things that you wouldn't even realize. Being being intentional about providing accessibility is very important. And I encourage people to work with individuals that are aware of this, especially in the future. Network with them, show up to their events, different workshops. I'm happy to share different workshops for you all to attend where you can learn these different things and see how accessibility and accommodation is provided, especially in the deaf and deafblind and deaf hard of hearing and deaf plus communities. So we can build upon that accessibility for those individuals.
This is Tiara speaking. Thank you, Kaya. That will be amazing. And we can send those resources, any resources that you would like to share as a follow-up to this webinar for those who are interested.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit and learn a little bit more about your personal experience, Kaya. So, how does intersectionality or the various aspects of your identity shape your experience with accessibility and the ADA?
Yes, this is Kaya speaking. Oh, wow. As a biracial deaf woman, intersectionality matters, right? It's important. Visual language, all of that. is me. I am not just one of those different things. And that is very important within our deaf and hard of hearing community. Just like in our hearing society, you have different populations. Our deaf community have their own different populations as well, right? You're not just deaf. There's hard of hearing individuals, there's deaf blind individuals, there's deaf plus individuals, there's deaf people who are Black, there's Hispanic and Latina deaf people, and they have their own culture, right? Their own language, their own history, their story. All of that encompass who they are, and that is important. And so we have to be cognizant of that. And as deaf BIPOC individuals, they need to be considered, and their needs need to be recognized, and they need to be valued, right? And equal, just like white deaf individuals. So when you think of deaf people, please make sure you consider all of us, right? All of us, because we're not monolithic, not just your typical white deaf individuals. And it's important that accessibility is not a one fits all, because it's not, right? For example, when you make a deaf Black person, ask them what kind of interpreter do they prefer. It's not just about language. They may want a Black interpreter to represent who they are, so that cultural representation is there. And it's very important to consider to make sure that they are represented fully, that they are seen. I've worked with many different interpreters over the years who provide my voice, and I prefer a Black woman to provide my voice for me. That represents who I am. That empowers me. And that is very important for the audience to empower their deaf individuals that they interact with. Not just providing accommodation and just saying, hey, I checked this, but no, making sure that cultural competency is there. And I think that is something that most people don't even think about, that these intersectionalities are there, that people have so many different identities and all of them need to be represented, especially within our disability community.
This is Tiara speaking. That was so powerful, Kaya. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you're right. I think sometimes people just get accustomed to compliance, right? They want to check the box, they want to meet the requirement. But what you're saying is we should not be using a cookie cutter approach. When it comes to accessibility, we really need to be looking at the individual and their unique needs. So thank you so much for highlighting that for us. Um, I understand that you currently work as a case manager at DEAF C.A.N. For those who do not know, can you tell us about DEAF C.A.N and how the agency strives to meet clients from all walks of life exactly where they are?
This is Kai speaking. I've been working for DEAF C.A.N for about 5 years now. Uh, oh, it's just my heart. I connect and vibe with the community. It's a wonderful uh, organization that has about 9 different programs. DEAF C.A.N started in 1982 as an interpreting agency to provide interpreting services for the deaf and hard of hearing community. However, when they were established and as they were providing services, they recognized that there was not a lot of advocacy happening for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, especially providing resources. And without accessibility to the outside world, outside of the deaf community, it was challenging. And so individuals were delayed on information about different things that they can apply for and have access to, and know that they have rights to this stuff, right? And so incidental learning and communication is missed within that community. And so because of that, DEAF C.A.N recognize these this lacking of services and resources. And so that was established. And recognizing that there's different needs in different communities. Like, again, remember, we're not monolithic. Even though we have hard of hearing people and deaf people, hard of hearing people don't necessarily utilize ASL as much and signing. And so we want to make sure that they have access to the things that they need, like hearing aids and other things. And so we want to make sure that there were programs and services for hearing aids and making sure that that resource was available for them. If they chose to communicate on the cell phone or phone back then, that they were able to communicate on the phone and how that would look like and what technology was utilized for that. We have a program called ICCI Connect. And that's for our deaf blind individuals. Tech is very expensive, especially for our deaf and blind individuals. And if they don't have a stable income, they can't afford the equipment that's necessarily needed for them within their home to get a larger iPad to be able to chat with their friends on FaceTime, because they will need a bigger screen than those who don't need a bigger screen. And so making sure we connect them to those resources and funding to provide them with those different devices. We also have a program for our senior citizens to make sure that they have continuing services, deaf doctors and deaf lawyers to know their rights, to make sure that they have information that's needed to prepare for end of life, right? Whether it's a will or hospice or any of those things, to be able to facilitate that information with their family members. Because oftentimes, deaf individuals that are born to families, they usually are the only ones that are deaf, and so communication is not strong there. And so we want to provide a strong advocate system for them, and that's what DEAF C.A.N provides, and that's how I step in as a case manager to connect them with these different services and professionals all over the U.S., not just medical and social work and the like, but making sure that our senior citizens are involved in activities, right? Just like anyone else. So quality of life for them is better. So the resources are intentional to make sure that quality of life is better for them and their individual needs. And again, this is not one fits all cookie cutter, but to make sure that we are accommodating them where they are.
This is Tiara speaking. Does DEF C.A.N service all of Michigan, or is it only for residents of a specific area who can access services from DEF C.A.N?
This is Kai speaking. Good question. We are a statewide agency. We work with people all over Michigan, but most of our clients are in Southeast Michigan that we service. I've worked with clients from Flint, Grand Rapids, Traverse City, all over. But most of our clients that I see in person are typically in the Southeast Michigan area.
This is Tiara. Thank you, Kaya. So as someone who participated in DEF C.A.N's youth programs and is now a professional and advocate, can you tell us how community-based programs contribute to long-term empowerment within the deaf community? I think this question is particularly important during this time when we are seeing issues with funding specific types of programs. So why is this programming so important?
This is Kaya speaking. Yes. Um, with our political climate that's happening right now, there has been some huge changes with federal and state funding, and it's very concerning. Many organizations, not just DEAF C.A.N, but many organizations that rely on this funding for their programs have lost funding or funding has been reduced significantly. It's very sad, not just for myself as a deaf individual. Um, I grew up attending DEAF C.A.N youth programs. Um, not just summertime, but year round, after school activities, going to see my friends, and all of the things like that. I was mainstreamed when I went to school, and I was the only deaf child in the classroom, in the school often. The students were nice, yes, but it still was challenging because I was the only person there that was deaf. So when school was over, I was able to go to DEAF C.A.N after school activities to see my deaf friends and be able to communicate and be a child, be a teen, and not worry about communication access or awkwardness, that type of thing. And so it was natural, right, to be included. And they taught me a lot about self identity and self advocacy. If I didn't have DEAF C.A.N, I don't think I would be the Kaya you see today, right? Um, and I'm just being honest. They helped me build my self-esteem and who I am and my confidence. I'm learning how to advocate for myself. Um, and through that, I was like, I wanted to learn how to help others advocate for themselves. Seeing many deaf individuals around that don't have the same privilege I do makes me angry, right? And I wanted to change that. And I know I can't change the world, right? I'm just one person and can't change things overnight, but I can approach it one day at a time. If it's just from one person, if I can make that difference in that one person's life, then I've changed and provided impact. And to me, that is important. And these programs that DEAF C.A.N provides to the youth are really essential. It gives you a sense of belonging, community. They help with growth, right? Becoming a leader, becoming an advocate. And right now, I'm learning about writing grants. So I'm still learning from DEAF C.A.N, learning how to access funding to provide for the programs that we have so we can continue it because we don't want to see it fold. We want to see our deaf youth thrive and continue and not disappear or feel left out. And we have to continue to value them and the services that supports them in their matriculation through life.
Wow, this is Tiara speaking. Thank you for sharing, Kaya. I have one last question for you. What gives you hope for the future of accessibility and disability rights?
Right? This is Kaya speaking. Hmm. To be honest, sometimes I don't feel a lot of hope. Sometimes I'm nervous. I wake up nervous most days, wondering what's going to be next, what's going to happen. Well, but I try to be mindful. I try to remind myself that we have a lot of amazing people out here working, and I just need to connect together with them, collaborate with them. And collaboration and discussion can help us understand how we can continue the advocacy, the work. And without that collaboration, um, it will be a challenge. And so it is important that those of us that are doing the work, of us that are leading, to make sure that we support our youth, our deaf and hard of youth, within the camps that they attend, that we work together. And so all of that helps me when I'm feeling like I don't have hope, to stay positive. There is something in the future.
This is Tiara speaking. Thank you so much, Kaya. I'm going to ask another question that I had not prepared, but how important is community support? Given what you just said, right? You find hope in knowing that there are people working together collectively towards a common goal, right? To achieve accessibility and equity and inclusion in our society. So, how important is the support of the community? I'd like you to take a few minutes to just speak to our audience and those who are on the call who might be looking to get involved or wondering what they can do and how they can support these efforts.
This is Kaya. Thank you, Tiara. Ah, collaboration. What I mean with collaboration is different professionals, creative professionals from different areas, mental health, teachers, um, artists, everyone, right? We all should be working together. Everyone has a niche and skill that they can bring to the table, right? If we continue to fight for disability rights, if we continue to work together, to collaborate, working with different people, we learn from each other. We learn what we can do to support each other, uplift each other. Um, we developed accessibility for anyone. And what I mean by that is if you hire a deaf consultant to develop a conference or workshop or meeting, right? You're also hiring a deaf employee, which gives them opportunity to show their work, their skill, their talent. And I also encourage that let me see. So I love people. I love working with people. And with that, I'm excited to be here to have this discussion about disability rights, to talk about accommodations and accessibility. It's my part to bring that education here. And so thank you for the invite here. And I would like to see more of this in the future. When we celebrate ADA, we're celebrating the 35th anniversary today. This, again, is just the beginning. Even though we're 35 years in, we have a long way to go. And I'm proud of what we accomplished in these 35 years. And I'm aware that many more achievements will happen because of this, because of the collaboration, because we're connecting and providing these services.
This is Sierra speaking. Thank you again so much, Kaya, for sharing your perspective with us today. This was truly a great way to kick off our celebration of the ADA. Kaya will be available for questions at the end of the program. So feel free to continue to put those in the Q&A box. We are now going to have a brief break until 9:50 a.m. when we will resume with a discussion on digital accessibility. Please feel free to stay logged in and we will see you back at 9:50 a.m.